Where did you start and how did you get here?
I always struggle with the who am I question. Maybe that's like a silly thing, but I should have an elevator pitch and I don't. I'm a coach. I coach online. I coach in person. I coach nutrition. I coach other stuff too. A lot of CrossFit gymnastics obviously is where the world has taken me, but that's a relatively recent turn of events.
Let's start with that. Welcome to Behind the Knowledge, a best hour podcast where we dive deep into the lives and stories of inspiring coaches from all walks of life. The two hosts of this show are me, Pat Barber, and my good friend and fellow coach, Todd Acuto. Each week, we'll sit down with the most amazing coaches we can find, uncovering their unique paths, the challenges they've faced, and passions that continue to drive them. Whether you're a seasoned coach, an aspiring one, or simply somebody who likes listening to stories of how people achieve the success that they have, this podcast is for you. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be inspired by the powerful stories and insights from the world of coaching. This is Behind the Knowledge. Let's jump in. All right, now we can get serious that there's actual recording. No. Well, welcome, Anna. So Anna Wish, what's the full name? Because I keep on trying to say it when I see it on Instagram, and it's not easy for my little tiny brain to handle.
No, it's not. It's Wishnowsky.
Wishnowsky. And so do you go by Anna Wish more often than not?
I go by Anna Wish because people struggle to pronounce and spell the last name. So it's like, Gary V is not Gary Vaynerchuk or whatever his last name is. It's just like,
fair.
We can all pronounce V. We can all pronounce Wish.
Fair. And Anna Wish has a ring to it. You got Wish at the end there. It's like inspiring and hopeful. I like the whole thing. You and I have actually never chatted other than via text on an Instagram thread. We were kind of just talking about how we found each other. And it was more someone sent me something you sent, or you had made, and you've kind of dug into this world of coaching gymnastics and your background, and I'll get into that in a sec. But we've just kind of had some Instagram chats, and it made sense for me to bring you on board. And you seem like you've spent a bunch of time thinking about coaching and becoming a coach, and kind of specific to certain niches as well. And I'd love your perspective on all that. So again, the gist of this podcast, the podcast is going to be called Behind the Knowledge. We have our coaching development app called The Knowledge, which I hopefully one day you will contribute some fun, amazing stuff to. But that's all geared towards coaches and coaching development. And this is kind of like figuring out how you got to where you're at as a coach, what your perspective on fitness and coaching and all that fun stuff is, and kind of to tell your story more than anything else. So, we'll start it off, and I'll say who are you? Where are you? Where are you in the world? And if I had you kind of summarize your coaching journey to where you're at now, what does that look like? Where did you start and how did you get here?
Sure. That's all the questions. It's just starting with that.
That's the question. We'll start with that. We'll start with those. Let's start with that.
All right. I always struggle with the who am I question. Maybe that's like a silly thing, but I should have an elevator pitch and I don't. I'm a coach. I coach online. I coach in person. I coach nutrition. I coach other stuff too. A lot of CrossFit gymnastics obviously is where the world has taken me, but that's a relatively recent turn of events. I moved out of a corporate job into personal training in a big global gym setting in 2020. Immediately went into lockdown.
Super fun. Yep.
Yeah, it was the best. It was trial by fire. So I started doing the online stuff pretty much in the first year of my coaching, which
oh wow,
I think was a blessing in disguise in many ways, because it did force me to kind of start figuring out those processes. And it wasn't until 2021 I started doing CrossFit with the CrossFit Open. I just dropped into a gym and I did a trial one day because a friend brought me in, and then they were like, stick around, do the Open. And I was like, what's the Open? And so that was how I kind of stumbled into CrossFit very incidentally. And then didn't start coaching it until 2022 when I'd been doing CrossFit for about a year. I'd started Olympic weightlifting sort of middle end of 2021. And then 2022 got my CFL1 and then started coaching at the CrossFit box that I'd done all my Olympic lifting training at. And then, I started making content late 2022 after, Angus Bradley.
I don't know Angus Bradley.
No, go look up Angus Bradley later. Anyway,
I will.
I did a mentorship with Angus in early 2022, and later that year he was like, all right, like let's make some content, let's get you pumping with it. So yeah, it's really not been very long. Like it's been less than 2 years that I've been kind of focused into the CrossFit gymnastics space. All of the Globo gym stuff that I did before that was very mobility focused. Like I did, obviously strength trained people as well, but it was often people coming to me being like, I move like crap. So I kind of leveraged some of my gymnasty stuff in that, and I enjoyed kind of like dabbling in some gymnasty training during that time as well. But I really didn't kind of like find my own way back toward gymnastics until 2021 when I started doing and then eventually obviously coaching CrossFit as well.
Oh, interesting. So, okay. So you're relatively new to coaching. I mean, not new. I mean, you've been pretty neck deep in it since lockdowns and stuff. What was your corporate job before you jumped into this?
You're going to find this really funny. So one of the biggest companies in New Zealand is a dairy company, because that's the biggest export in New Zealand. You probably know this. Yeah. So I worked for the largest New Zealand dairy company, and anyone who knows who I'm talking about. I was a sales and marketing intern and then grad after I finished uni. But at uni, I had studied human physiology. That was like my undergrad. And then I also did a double degree. You can do that in New Zealand. So I did human physiology and marketing and management together as a conjoint degree. And then when I finished that, I was like, I wanted, or at least I thought I wanted to work in the business side of healthcare. So I was like, I'll just get some business experience. These guys are going to pay me. So I just took the job that I got offered. I was doing what I thought I was supposed to be doing. And then I hated it. I hated being at a desk. I hated corporate life. I hated the teams. I hated the people that I worked with. I was just like, none of this is for me. And then I started seeing a trainer myself who I had just kind of like chatted to in the gym. And he was like, hey, come do some mobility training. I'm like, sure. And then I kind of figured out that PT was more than just making people do burpees and goblet squats. So I got my start and then got my nutrition stuff after that.
And you're not in New Zealand anymore, right? Or are you in New Zealand? You're in Australia, right?
I'm in Australia now. So I lived in New Zealand for 10 years and then we moved to Brisbane in August last year in 2023.
Okay. Mind if I ask why the move? Just for lifestyle or what?
Lifestyle and cost of living were the two biggest ones. Like I struggled with the wet and grey weather in New Zealand. I wanted way more sunshine. Now we've got it, obviously.
Yeah.
And the cost of living, as you would have seen in New Zealand, is just, it's astronomical and it's getting worse. So we were at the point where we were like, we can either choose to live in the WOPs, where we don't want to live, or we can move to a city that you can actually make a living wage.
Got it. And so Brizzy was it. Sounds good. Brizzy's awesome. Yeah. I mean, I've spent a bit of time out there and I really enjoy it. And I like to visit New Zealand, but my kids have dual citizenship and I'm like, I don't know if I could ever be here long term. Just to do those, like, I'd have to live like so far north, like out in the cuts, when that'd be like my only way of doing it. And I could do that. Like, I don't need people. That's never been my thing. Okay. So you've been coaching then. So what's your sports and athletic background? Because did you come into this with nothing, or like what is your sporting background?
I did gymnastics when I was a little kid, and then I didn't do it for many years, and then I went back as a teenager. So I've like some gymnastics history, but not the good kind where you have all the foundational understanding, just kind of like some jobs. And I played soccer. I was a left forward.
Nice.
And then I just started going to the gym for weight loss when I was 17.
Interesting.
Which turned into a whole series of disordered eating events, but we'll skip that one for this podcast.
For sure. I mean, I do have stuff in here talking about just like essentially if there's something you go back and something you learned about fitness or you thought about fitness that you've changed over the years. I'd be curious as to what that was.
Be one of them.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll ask you a question later on that to finish it all up with, but I have a guess as to what your answer might be just based off of what you're saying there. Okay. So you became a coach and initially you started coaching at a local Globo gym. So I think in Australia and New Zealand, you actually need your, it's like a proper credential that you get in order for you to actually coach. What is that credential called again?
In New Zealand, it was just a level 4 PT cert. I don't know if it has another name. I can't remember.
Yeah.
They just call it level 4.
Level 4 PT cert. That was what my wife studied, and it was always interesting to me. I loved how people had to go through a bit more education before they got stuff, but I also think it comes with its hurdles in the sense that there's not much actual coaching that is done in it, more learning, which is good. Learning is awesome. But the actual, when you hit the floor and you were coaching, what was the initial things? You said you were coaching mobility. What does that mean exactly?
So I kind of wanted to follow in the footsteps of my own trainer just because I loved what he did and I could see a real impact of how he coached people. And, like, because he did so much focus on movement things, he helped people kind of like rebuild confidence in their body, not just the like aesthetic sense where people are like, oh, I look better, but like in the sense that they trusted their bodies enough to move and do the strength training stuff that was good for them. So that was where I kind of started. And I thought I wanted to go. I was like, maybe I go back and train as a physio. Maybe I do something in that like rehab world. So that's where my head was at the time. So I had done my FRC cert. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're a mobility system. And then I started doing more stuff with like David Gray and various other systems, Gary Ward, like going into some of the more like biomechanical lens of those things. And I enjoyed it. I really liked it, but I also knew that I was growing out of it in a sense. It was like, I don't know that I want to work in a global gym forever. So it was good. It gave me the foundations of like cueing, coaching, getting people to buy into what you're telling them to do, like understanding the path forward of, sorry, are you getting heaps of birds?
I think it sounds awesome. And I'm just going to, anybody who's listening to it, I'm just going to say that's actually part of your own voice that they're hearing. And you just have this kind of like croaky sound that it's the New Zealand Australian accent that combines to create that croakiness. 3
vocal cords. I'm a 2. So yeah, that was kind of where that came from, was like, okay, I want to be able to, not that I didn't believe that the other trainers in the gym were having a positive impact on people's lives, but I did think like, I don't want to be someone who just screams at people like a drill sergeant doing burpees. That wasn't ever my style or set of interests. So, and like I was really invested. Like I would have clients who were seeing a physio who I was aligned with, and I would go to their physio appointments because I just wanted to learn from the guy, like, what's going on? What do you do? Like, what do you prescribe in this sense? What's in my scope? How can I help? So I spent just like hours and hours in the physio office he's a friend of mine now. But at the time I was just like this yappy trainer being like, tell me how this works. So like that, I think that was a really important foundation for my learning, because it like, I guess it just gave me a couple of different lenses to look through as I was coaching people. And then obviously in 2021, I was like, oh, there are other options here now that I'm doing CrossFit. I can see that could be a fun thing. And there's lots of other ways to train that can be highly beneficial. So, yeah. Yeah.
So it sounds like you're relatively open-minded when it comes to, and not open-minded, more curious than anything else. It sounds like anything that you could see of being value to people, you tend to be quite curious about and pursue it pretty avidly. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I get a little bit like obsessive, I guess, when I'm like, ooh, what's this cool thing? Like I went deep on FRC in the beginning because I was like, I want to understand this system. And then once I kind of felt like I had clocked enough of that to be able to use it, I was like, what's the next one? Gary Ward. Let's do biomechanics of the lower limb with Gary Ward. Let's see what's David Gray's take on biomechanics of the lower limb. And like, I would just go to like PRI. I would just went down all these random little rabbit holes for the first kind of like 3 years that I was coaching. And then CrossFit became its own rabbit hole. And I was like, what is this?
It's an oddly large hole to climb into.
I think a little stuck.
It's so deep. So if I had to ask you now, like in terms of where you're at with your headspace and what is it you would say you do? Because and what is your current passion in the area that you're putting most of your focus?
I enjoy the 2 main populations that I work with. The first population is people who are at that sort of like beginner/intermediate stage of CrossFit, and they're trying to improve their specific skills. I like coaching gymnastics. I like coaching Olympic lifting. I like helping people get from kind of square 0 and square 1 to squares 2 and 3. I don't like getting people from square 5 to square 8. I just don't care. At that point, I'm like, you're good enough. But go find someone else who wants to do elites. That's not my thing.
Right. Right.
So I love coaching those people because it, especially online, it forces you to be quite creative about like, okay, this person's not understanding this concept. What are the pieces of that thing that they don't get? How do I communicate that? And then how do I make sure that I'm developing or finding drills that are going to help bridge the gap in their understanding and then therefore in their performance. So that's kind of like my first group of people. And then the second group of people that I tend to work with is people who are like want to train in a CrossFit-esque way, but are not married to CrossFit itself or don't want to do CrossFit classes, and they don't want to do like a mayhem style program because the volume is so high. Or, you know, people who are like, sometimes I'll joke that it's like people who are jaded about CrossFit because they've left it for whatever reason. And they're seeking a different solution, but they still want to incorporate the gymnastics, the weightlifting, the, you know, maybe some speed training because I'm doing some of that myself at the moment. So it's very CrossFit adjacent, and it's like, you could probably even argue that it's like CrossFit OG philosophy in some senses, but it's the like the quasi CrossFitters that I like to work with on the other side.
Yeah, ironically enough, I would define that as doing CrossFit. I mean, I think that the state we find ourselves in at most gyms is they're doing a version of CrossFit that has been kind of co-opted by a competitive realm. And so what you're doing sounds to me, I mean, you said OG CrossFit, it's never changed. The actual definition and all the methodology has never changed. The problem is when you run a licensee model versus a franchise model, people get to interpret the methodology as they see fit. So, you know, I don't know if you know much about my background, but I've been doing this for like 20 years since the original gym. Like I trained with Greg at the main space. And so what's interesting is the methodology has never changed, and the like points behind it have never changed. It's just the interpretation of it. What we find in most gyms is something that it leaves things to be desired. It leaves things on the plate. And that's it's a bummer, but my thing that I try to do is I try to educate coaches. And so I try to jump in there and chat with people and be like, hey, this is too much for normal people. Why are you doing this? And the way, if you're curious, the way those conversations usually end up working well is if we re-examine why we're doing what we're doing, it's much easier to get them to do the right things. Because a lot of people will not know why they're doing it. They're like, because it's CrossFit. I'm like, no. We don't do CrossFit because it's CrossFit. We do CrossFit because it gives us something. Now, what does it give us? And they'll be like, they'll say something. They'll be like, we'll be stronger. We'll get this. And then we'll be faster at Fran. I'm like, no. It's so we can achieve fitness in a very specific way. So like those conversations become pretty interesting. And I have them often just because, I mean, I still teach level 1s. I teach level 2s. I travel all around the world and do this stuff. And I think essentially the reason we've got to where we're at is due to a weird game of telephone. You know, it was like your experience of CrossFit was when you went to that gym, right? And the programming that gym did at their space was based off of their understanding and whoever they were taking that from or whatever it was. And so it's this chain of small changes that ended up in this place of like stuff that is falling way outside the overall reason behind we're originally doing this. Anyway, I'd be curious as to what are the main changes that you kind of make in those programs, because we recently talked on a thread that you made you actually made a meme version of a post where you were going on like the normal CrossFitter back and forth thing. And I hate social media more than like anything in the world, but if I have a social presence to some degree, but I think that by nature, in order to be seen, we have to take a stand, right? We have to, and if you make a funny stand, it's even better because then people relate to it on two fronts. And like you play a game of like saying real stuff, but also interweaving entertainment. And like there's like, you've done it very well on your platform, and you do a great job of educating while simultaneously being playful. But like you said, when you say certain things, there's a demographic of people who come at you. And I'm actually curious, what are the main things that people say to you when you propose ideas that are counter to the current CrossFit narrative? Like, what are the main fights that you tend to have, or not fights, but just conversations that are from like CrossFitters?
It's funny because like when I think about them, because you're going to get them, it's inevitable.
Of course.
It comes from a kind of, as you've alluded to, it comes from a lack of understanding about basic training principles and a blind loyalty to what they think CrossFit is or should be.
Yeah.
And so the arguments are rarely actual logical arguments. It's usually more just sticking up for CrossFit as a sport because they think that I'm attacking it. And I'm like, no, I have no issue with CrossFit as a concept. Like the idea that we're going to combine lots of varied training and, like, sure, great. There's lots of gold in that. I do have an issue with like strength plus Metcon every day at max intensity until you die. Like,
100%, which I would argue has never, ever been CrossFit.
No. Well, exactly. And so I think it's important to distinguish between like CrossFit, the original philosophy, CrossFit HQ messaging, which doesn't always align with OG philosophy, and then CrossFit as performed at the affiliate level, where shit is wild, like a little bit Wild West sometimes, where it's just like
totally.
the member expectation has led to an outcome at the box level that no longer serves the original intent, which is just good training, right? Like it's like we need to train endurance, we need to train strength, we need to train skills and movement capacity and understanding of your body and whatever. So usually people are defending CrossFit because they are not able to distinguish those things in their mind. Like CrossFit is it's confusing because you're thinking CrossFit, what you've been exposed to, and I'm like, there's this, and then there's this, and then there's this, and like none of it necessarily like doesn't always align. So it can be very hard to argue for without being able to distinguish those things. And I'm just not going to do that in an Instagram comment. I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah. I mean, it's not possible. It's not possible. It's like, it's not even possible to do it in an Instagram comment. I've almost completely abandoned having any conversations that I want to have that are meaningful in comments. Like very rarely, I've found one of the best ways to do it is you just ask questions back. So you just, rather than actually pose any sort of ideas, you just, if they post some bullshit, you just ask a question back to it. And then eventually they'll walk themselves either to the right answer, or you'll just realize they're an idiot and then you just stop doing it. But it's a fascinating little space. And even in how you're describing it there is like CrossFit as a methodology is very different than CrossFit as a competitive sport. But the names get co-opted with each other. And then even the way you disperse it there, of like the messaging from CrossFit HQ versus the messaging from, CAP, the program, or what's on .com or whatever it might be. Or even when you go into like the messaging that gets touted by people at affiliates. And I think that that's where one of the largest disconnects are, because the actual experience of what CrossFit is at the affiliate. So like, you can't be mad at people when they're experiencing one thing and then someone says, well, that's not quite it. And then they're like, but I've experienced it for 2 years this way. And you're like, but you're wrong. And what's fascinating to me too, though, is like, to some extent, even crappy programs work quite well. And you're like, damn, like you're not thinking long-term, and you're not thinking about, actually improving everything around the board and all this other stuff. And you're not very intelligent with it. But even the shittier versions of this are actually quite effective at creating change in humans, which then you have to be like, hey, I know it's working kinda, but you're wrong. And then then that conversation becomes extra contentious. So anyway, it sounds like you get a whole slew of these and it's more of like the just the people who are extra zealots, people who believe without examining their own belief structure, that you mainly have these conversations with. If you had to say, one thing you would currently change about like that whole space, even the CrossFit space, what would be one thing that you would change about the narrative within the CrossFit space right now, if you could? Like, you wave a little magic wand and you're like, let's change this narrative with regards to the programming or the methodology in general. I'm curious.
I would 100% push back on the idea that every workout should have strength plus metcon. I just think I just think that's like the biggest problem, because if you create the member expectation that the structure is the same every single day, you've reinforced the idea that like it can't, like that you can't spend days on focusing in on skill, focusing in on strength, focusing in on conditioning. And you can't train either of those things for long enough because of the nature of a class, like transition time. You know, if we're very lucky at the gym that I currently work at, we'll have 2 coaches for a lot of classes because we've got 30, 40 members in there. But, you know, trying to herd that many people and get them to, you know, change thing or whatever, it means you can't do those longer form workouts that they probably need. Like, you need to sit on a rower for 40 minutes. Like, you can't currently do it. Therefore, you need it. Like, you should be able to do a piece that is like, you don't pick up a dumbbell, you don't pick up a barbell, you just smash away on the ergs and go for a run. Like, you should be able to do that stuff. And in the, like, you know, warm up plus strength plus metcon plus stretch at the end format, it's just really hard to do those things. So like when I take that out of the hands of a gym context and into the hands of my own programming for clients, it's like, cool, we're going to separate some of this stuff out. And like, occasionally you'll do a bit of both, and that's totally fine. But we just need to be able to assess where we're putting our intensity, how we're driving those things, and just be a little bit more intentional rather than focusing on meeting a member expectation of the format.
Well, I find it really interesting that you have this perspective after such a short time in the space, when it's like you could very easily have the other perspective. You know, like you could very easily be the person who's like strength metcon every day because it worked really well for me, blah, blah, blah. But you don't. You have what I would like to call the correct perspective. Like, what do you think is different about your experience through it that makes you go, no, man, like, why are you like this? And then other people, like the first gym that you went to, what was their programming like? What did it look like?
Strength and metcon. Absolutely was.
So that even reinforces my question as to like, why the heck do you have this perspective that's the correct perspective? Again, I'm going to say it again. If you're listening, it's the correct perspective. Like, why do you have that, Anna? And being such a short time in the space, but I've known people in this space for 15 years who have their heads so far up their strength metcon ass that they just can't pick it apart. Like, tell me, why do you think you have this perspective? Why did you not go, this is it, and then dig in?
I never really did classes.
Oh!
I never drank the Kool-Aid. You'll hate this, but I've probably done 10 to 15 CrossFit classes in my life. I've coached many more than that, but I've only done, it'll be less than 15. Like less than 20 for sure, but probably less than 15. I did a couple of classes leading into the open at that CrossFit box that I started at. I did a couple of classes at the gym before I started coaching. I was a trainer first and foremost. Like, I did S&C. My background was like understanding principles of S&C. And when I did my CrossFit level 1, I was sitting there trying to layer what they're saying in with how does training work. And if you know how training works and how like stimulus response works, strength metcon every day at high intensity doesn't make sense to you. You can't reconcile understanding of training with short strength, short metcon, and ending up doing fucking 30 minutes of work in a 1-hour class, and you're not training enough.
Yeah.
You can't make it make sense if you understand how training works.
Well, the wild thing is, like, there is tangible evidence to support otherwise, in the sense that, like, I've seen lots of people become extremely fit with strength metcon across about a 5 years. About a 5-year span. So like, it works, but it doesn't work in the long term because you end up leading to burnout, and you also lack capacity in many areas. And you're training for almost the sport of what we're doing versus the lifestyle of being able to do it long term. So like it's hard because it does work, but not it's like not how we want it to. But
because you're right. Bad training programs still work, but it's it's like, well, what is work? Like, what is the outcome that you want? If the outcome is be able to do Metcons, then like you get good at that because you practice that.
Right.
But like, did you become a skillful athlete? Did you become a fit athlete? Are you able to train across several domains and succeed in all of them? Can you drop into any sport on any day and succeed? No, because you can Metcon. You're good at Metconning. Right. That's not the same thing.
And it's often barbell cycling and very silly things. And it's just like, I get it. They're effective tools, but man, in the definition, it's like constantly varied. And if you're doing strength Metcon every day, that straight alone is not a constant variance. And have you gone back and ever looked at like the old 2001, 2002, 2003 programming from Greg? It's super fun because he's kind of tinkering with it. You can, because if you go back in the archives, I actually just did a full month of his program. Like February 2001 is the first month they ever program. And you go back in the archives, you can look at Greg's writing and him programming there. It's all been free on CrossFit.com for years. And you can see him, and it's like so many of the workouts are much longer and much more single focused. And like it's just so different than what we see in a lot of these boxes, and like really open-ended ones that involve, swimming. And it's like, go for a 30-minute cool swim. And then you come back out of that and you're doing rope climbs and push-ups. And it's like, it's really open-ended. It just says 30 minutes, rope climbs and push-ups, get as many as you can. No standard other than that. And it's just like spending time working on it and going through it. It's like, it's fascinating to look at how far we've come. And I think that there was things that needed to change from then, for sure, in terms of maximizing capacity. But also, I think it has been a bit bastardized in the direction that it ended up going. Anywho, I would like to let you know that if you ever do train in good CrossFit gyms, I would say, that run single workout days, like I've run many of them, they're super magical. And like everything that you speak about can be done without the strength Metcon setting and can make it like really fun. And that coaching one-on-one athletes, but you can actually make it really fun in a community environment because you prioritize the experience of that hour and you're focusing on so much less that you just have so much time to coach and develop interpersonal relationships. And you got to think like the goal with this program is they're doing cartwheels when they're 80, like that's why we do it. Not so we can do strength Metcons again and again and again. So it is possible. I've seen it time and time again, and it fascinates me that the people don't do it. But what I will say though, is if you've ever worked with people, it's really hard to transition a gym from the strength Metcon experience because there's the physiological pattern has been built up of like, this is what I'm expecting. This is what my intended like physiological payoff's going to look like. And then this is what happens. Then all of a sudden they don't get it. And because you're trying to shift the mentality and they lose their shit. And you're like, no, like it's a fascinating thing to do.
And that's what I mean by member expectation, right? Is like, if you're a business owner, you're balancing the needs of improving your member base fitness with what they expect, what they want, what they're willing to pay for. And if what they expect and what they want is strength Metcon, your hands are somewhat tied. Like you could make your gym better at executing fitness, but can you make your gym successful at doing that because you're like educating the member base to believe in it? And those are different skill sets, and it's hard to be able to do both. So I do have a lot of empathy for business owners that are like, well, I have to get people through the doors. Like if I change this right now, half of them are going to leave and go to Fitstop or F45 because they want this one thing.
Right.
So I see why it happens that way. I just think it's suboptimal. That's all.
I think if you're willing to lie to yourself and prioritize your money over your belief structure, or if you're willing to shift your belief structure, it can work. It would never work for me. I would never I would rather my gym fail, which it wouldn't. I've never run a failing gym. That's the weird part for me is like, I've never run a gym that didn't have ridiculous amounts of members. I think the hardest part though is people who initially bought into it, who all of a sudden have this epiphany and they're like, oh no, I have to change. And you're like, that's going to be rough. But I don't know. My argument would be your gym won't be around in that long if you continue to do strength back on. But that's just my in the business development space. I think you're going to just have too high a turnover of clients, and eventually it'll die unless you can get more people in the doors. And then that's. But that's not what we're going to talk about. Let's move on here. I had other questions. I don't like coaching at all in the digital space. Personally, I think it's my least favorite thing to do, but you do it and you do it well. What makes an effective like digital coach, like somebody who's offering something worthwhile? Because I see people who are like digital coaches and they offer jack shit. They offer a templated program that they give out to people, and they hope because they look good online that people follow them. And then they offer them nothing that's even remotely meaningful. And some of them even work, but it's like it doesn't sound even like you do that. So what makes your coaching effective in a digital space? And what about that do you find joy in?
I think online coaching is tough in the sense that it takes longer to build the level of relationship that you would like to build with your clients. And you have to almost over communicate sometimes anytime you're working in a relationship where you are online. That's something that even like tech world people will say if you're remote workers or, like if you're in a, remote company, is like you almost have to just like say too much all the time. And so I think like I'm always trying to make sure that I'm doing enough to stay like emotionally connected with my clients, because the first thing that I will feel if I know a client is going to, go off into the wilderness is I don't feel emotionally connected with them anymore. So I actually do think that a lot of it does come down to that. I know other coaches who will be like, nah, that's not it. You just need to write a good program. They can execute. Fuck them. Which I can understand if you're not a people person, but like I am. I'm socially needy. I want to be friends with my clients. I want them all to pass the have a beer test. Like, I just prefer it that way. So I do think like relationship is one of the big factors. And if you're feeling any level of disconnect with a client, at least for me, my strategy is always like, cool, let's hop on a Zoom. Like, let's chat. Let's catch up. Tell me about your life. How's your dog?
Right.
And just making sure that I feel connected with them. And that also gives you the space to realign on like, cool, where are we heading with this programming? Like, how's the hammy? All of that kind of stuff. So emotional connection is one thing. Having a program that they buy into, obviously, is another one. If they think that it's going to work, they're going to fucking make it work.
Right.
So that's a big one. Being creative with cues. Having 11 ways to say the same thing. If you are a one-trick pony and you're trying to coach online and someone's not getting it, you're done. Like, that's it. If you have provided the cue that you know for the thing and it doesn't work, that's where your journey ends. Whereas if you've got like, okay, that's all right. Try it this way. Try this drill. That drill wasn't for you. Oh, that didn't produce the outcome I expected. Let's change that this week. I just think you have to be able to have the flexibility to try lots of different things in like for the same person, and have you both be able to like, oh, okay, like this didn't work. Let's pivot. Let's try this. So a level of like flexibility, playfulness in a sense, allowing people to prioritize their training without taking it too seriously. Do you know what I mean? Where like, if they get so invested that every failure is a reflection on their ego, then that is a challenge to overcome. So just being like, that's right. Let's play. Let's chill out. Let's relax. Like, we'll try a new thing. I think those are probably like, if I had to sum it up, it would be those three things: emotional relationship, buy-in with programming, and flexibility and playfulness.
Got it. And then how many people do you coach at a time? Do you do one-on-one? Is that like a thing, or is it all via, is it live interaction, or do you do like looms back and forth where you're doing videos and sending them to each other in text? And like, what is your method for coaching in that setting?
Loom primarily. So I do everyone's on an individualized program. I don't do cookie cutter for my one-to-one clients. It is personalized. And then they're sending me videos in WhatsApp every week. They'll get the occasional reply, but for the most part, they've got like one review day a week where most of our comms happen. They get a Loom. I'm looking at all of their videos that they've sent me, and then they'll reply to me with like, yeah, good Loom, didn't understand this. What's this? Like, tell me more, So we have little bits of back and forth on their like once a week day.
Yeah.
And then I just do a Zoom type check-in when I think they need it. Like I actually don't put it into the package because some people are like, sweet, for 6 months, they don't want to chat that much. They're like living their best life. And then other people who I'm like, you're a twice a quarter kind of person. Let's just catch up with you a little bit more often.
Right.
And like, that's not very standardized. It's definitely not like typical for people to do it that way, but
yeah,
it works. I like it. I feel like I get to talk to people that I want to talk to. And so I basically have 3 tiers of package now. Like my highest tier people are just the ones who train the most often. So like if they're training 7, but like 6 times a week, whatever, if I'm writing 6 days of program, they're on the higher package. And then the lowest tier one is like, I just want a couple of skill focused sessions in a week because I'm trying to learn toast to bar, bottom slope, whatever.
Yeah.
So everyone's just kind of on whatever package makes sense for their needs. Some of them do just skill programming. Some of them do a whole holistic program. And what have I got? I think between nutrition and one-to-one programming, I think I've got a roster of 36 at the moment. Maybe 37 by next week because I've got a consultation this afternoon.
Hell yeah.
So like it's a fair few. And then I've got Gambaroo app with Eugene Teo. So that's where my kind of like off the shelf programs go. It's like bar muscle up program, nose to bar program, handstand walk program. And then my train along program, which is sort of just like, I just write what I'm doing into a program and then people can follow along. I actually don't know how many subscribers I have on Gambaroo. I know Eugene told me this morning that we've got like 200 people who have subscribed to the Infinite program, roughly. It was something just over 200. So I'm like, I'm not really coaching those people, but I've got a Facebook group where I check whatever videos people come in and give them a reply from time to time for the people that are on that. So I don't know if you would call that people that I'm coaching. It's people that are on a program that I've written, but it's different.
But, I mean, that's still valuable. I think templated programs can still be extremely valuable. They're awesome. But I was just kind of curious in the one-on-one interactions and how you make those work. So that's awesome. So you can handle about 36. What do you think your cap is there for how much you could handle meaningfully?
We'd probably add it reasonably.
Yeah.
Like I could probably take on a few more nutrition.
Yeah.
But I can't make more space for programming. It's just like,
I get it.
If I have I start to rush it, and I don't want to rush it. I want to sit there and be like, I have time to absorb and imbibe and look at the numbers that you've sent me and like feel good about the product that I put out. So yeah, definitely no more than 40. And that because I've got a few PTs in the week as well. Like I coach, what do I coach? I coach 4 classes in person, and then I coach an Olympic lifting specialty class. And then I'll have a couple of PTs in the week as well. So it's like the roster of close to 40 online clients, plus a few CrossFit classes, plus Olympic lifting, plus the odd PT, like it stacks up fast.
Yeah. It sounds like you're super busy, and then you're simultaneously trying to produce content and put stuff out and do that whole thing. It sounds like you're doing a lot. Well, good for you. You're killing it. I like your perspective. It's really awesome. And I appreciate your, how rapidly you came to the conclusion that you did. Because if you ask me, you're still relatively new to this, but you're seeing a lot of success, and you've got a pretty, a keen way to like differentiate the things that you're choosing to do. Also, I don't think that many people are offering meaningful programs when it comes to specific skill development. Especially in a one-on-one setting. So it's awesome. If people want to find that, where do they find you?
At Anna Wish Fitness is my Instagram, and then my website is annawish.net. So either
cool.
or.
Annawish.net or at Anna Wish Fitness. Cool. Let's see. we'll just finish things off because I don't want to take too much of your time. I know I said that earlier, but and now we're 45 minutes deep. But if there was like, because you've in your period of time, you've had things change about your ideas around fitness, and I asked you the question in CrossFit, what would you change? But in the larger fitness understanding of the world, like, is there anything like we wave a magic wand, everybody understands, or whatever it is, like, what is the thing that you would change in the larger fitness space if you could, or get everybody to understand? Is there something that like you wish was different in the larger fitness space?
It's
You're made to
almost
say
hard
no
to
too.
choose.
Yeah, it's hard to choose all of the things. Just all of it. Yeah.
I'm gonna say two things, but they're related, so just bear with me for a second. One of them is exploring stuff outside of your like usual training. So if you're a weightlifter, there's merit to exploring gymnastics. There's merit to exploring, I don't know, whatever. Like having more than one like bow in your arrow is a really good idea. I think for a lot of people, it broadens your skill set as an athlete, and often makes you better at the thing. Does that mean that you should swim 40 kilometers a week and then try to be an elite weightlifter? No, that's stupid. But like, you should have multiple, you shouldn't, I don't think that a one-trick pony is going to be as lifelong successful and healthy as someone who isn't, right?
Right.
And that doesn't mean I have no respect for someone who's like an elite grade powerlifter or whatever. But
Sure.
I'm like, you're going to be an elite grade powerlifter for a duration of time. Then you're going to be old. And then what?
Right.
So like, there's obviously a difference there between like sport and outcomes for sport versus lifestyle and outcomes for lifestyle. But even in the context of sport, I think that exposure to a few different things, even microdosing those small things, can be a really useful and helpful thing for an athlete's overall development. And the other thing that I'd say about that is a good place to microdose that I think is so underutilized is warm-ups. I think that people think that a warm-up needs to be this. And I think that a warm-up could be a heavy Maltese press, because you're not going to hurt yourself doing a dumbbell, like bicep curl, something like that, where I'm like, you're underdosing these things anyway. Just crowbar them into the warm-up, and then you'll have a little bit of exposure to something that's different. Yeah. So underutilization of warm-ups is one of the like war paths that I'm currently on. Just like make them better.
Let's film that for the knowledge. Let's do a whole series of warm-ups that you think coaches should use and what your mindset is around coaching and where you go to those and what type of days they could be used on. I think 20 of those would be freaking legit. We'll just get them into the hands of coaches to go out and use within the fitness space.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Hell yeah. That's a great place to end. Well, thank you so much, Anna. And is there anything else you would like to say? Or again, you told us where we could find you, Anna Wish Fitness. Was that it at Instagram?
That's me. Yep.
And then annawish.net. Anything else you would like to share with the audience of Zero currently?
No, that's all the insights I've got for you for today.
Well, thank you so much.
I have run out. I have to say them.
Out. All right.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Behind the Knowledge. Now, if you want help developing your coaching and to learn from us directly, check out The Knowledge Pro. There we host live calls with our coaches every week where we discuss content together and work on skills to improve our on-the-floor coaching ability. To learn more, you can head over to besthouroftheirday.com/theknowledge. And if you found this content helpful, we're going to be releasing new episodes every week, so subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend. Thanks again for listening, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.